Hey, how's it going? Ando here from Happy Life Martial Arts. Welcome to episode number 83 of Fight for a Happy Life, the show that believes even a little martial arts makes life a whole lot better. Today, an in-depth conversation with Sensei Jaredd Wilson. Do you know Jaredd Wilson? He's the host of the long-running martial arts podcast, Martial Thoughts. If you're not a fan of that show, I definitely recommend you check it out. I'll put the links below. But today, we had time to really sit down and talk about learning martial arts and teaching martial arts. There's a lot of good insights in this one. So let's sit back, relax, and take a listen to what Sensei Jaredd Wilson has to say. Sensei Jaredd Wilson, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me on. I've known you for a long time. It's good to be on your show. I think we did our show 4 or 5 years ago now.
Wow, so you're going to shame me right off the bat. I was going to be man enough to bring it up. Yes, you were one of the first people kind enough to invite me on to a podcast to be interviewed. I was honored. I bragged about it everywhere. I swore that I would immediately have you back on the show to return the favor, and somehow years passed. I'm really a scumbag for that. So I apologize that it's taken so long to finally connect here on my side of the world, but welcome nonetheless.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for your patience. Okay, now enough about all of my failings. Let's get to your failings. The name of the show is Fight for a Happy Life, so I always like to start off by asking, how do you define a happy life, and how is your fight going?
Well, I'm going to put in something a little bit different. It's not necessarily the happy life per se, but it's what makes me happy, what makes me happy is a weird word. Maybe content is a better word, something along those lines. But for me, it's about learning new things. Okay. And I like to be able to connect the dots on things. I've talked about a lot on my show anyway, how for me, martial arts is like a gateway drug. It introduces you to all the other aspects of the philosophy, the history, the metallurgy. I've had to look up stuff on, all these other different aspects of things that you have to kind of research to figure out what it is that your martial art is actually trying to teach you. Because for the most part, martial arts are capsules in time. They were done at a specific point, and unless it keeps changing all the time, it's a time capsule, and you have to go dig it up and see what it was like then. So you have to understand what the context of what it is. And most of the time, they're not very explicit in the context.
Boy, you're the first person who's ever said metallurgy on the show. So
Yes.
Right off the bat, congratulations for that. That's incredible. Wow. Yeah, I think you've taken us already down an interesting path. You're learning. I think most people, when they think of martial arts and learning, they're thinking about punches and kicks and techniques. But this idea of a time capsule, that's really interesting. So do you feel like you are in a line of previous masters and you're going to be the link in that chain to continue these traditions? Or do you feel like you can just wipe all that stuff away and at some point just do your own thing and not care about what anyone else ever did?
Well, at the very least, you have to look at why they did it that way. There was a reason for it. One of my real easy examples that I use is knife techniques. If you look at Japanese knife techniques, they're very slow, very direct, and usually stabs versus like slashes. As opposed to say something like the Filipino arts or silat or something, where it's very fast and very slashy. And that has to do with the context of how they were used. In the Japanese tradition, it's because you were going against armor. So you had to be targeted, specific on your target, and very direct to go through the armor places. In the more tropical places, Indonesia, the Philippines, being slashy is better. That's a different way to use their environment, or their environment causes the martial arts to be different. So that's what I mean by a lot of context, is you have to understand more than just the martial art itself. There's a reason why they do things like that.
That's fascinating, actually. I don't think that's ever been brought up on the show either. Actual tactical thoughts about slashing versus stabbing. What do you personally, just a quick tangent, what do you personally subscribe to? You work with a tanto, I presume, or some kind of sword still, I know. So what's your bent personally, stab, slashes, or a mix?
So The type of martial art that I'm doing now is traditional has a lot of weight to it, but I'll say a traditional martial art, traditional Japanese martial art. Um, but looking at the techniques, you can tell that it's from the post-armor period because there's a lot of cuts that if they were in armor, it wouldn't work, or they're small cuts versus, trying to stab through someone's armor. Something that's a little bit weird that, you may not think about is swords are really crappy battlefield weapons. The instant you get any kind of armor, they're essentially useless. So, but they're really good for being carrying around in civil situations.
And so, do you do that? Do you carry your sword around in civil situations?
Well, I have a pocket knife, so that's about as close as I can get.
Portable sword, excellent.
Mini swords.
So your definition of a happy life immediately led to slashing and stabbing people.
Or at least learning how to do it.
Okay, well, I'm glad you found something that makes you happy. I mean, some people pick pottery. I don't know what's wrong with you. Now, I know from other conversations that your fascination with the sword has been lifelong, right? Why is that? What do you think? Are you a reincarnated samurai? What is your fascination with swords?
I hope not. They had some brutal lives, too. My interest in swords goes back to a really interesting place. My mom was a Middle Eastern dancer, like a belly dancer, so the kind of the guttural term for it, so to speak.
Okay.
And she had a lot of dances where she would balance swords on her head. So we just always kind of had several swords sitting around our house. Fun things for kids to play with.
Absolutely. Do you have all your fingers, sir? I forgot to ask.
Yeah, it's all 9 of them.
Just normal.
And then it grew into, I guess, out of like King Arthur and D&D and all that stuff. And by the time I was in college, I decided I wanted to learn how to use swords. That was a determination point I had. And in my ignorance of the time, I said, well, if I'm going to use a sword, I'm going to learn how to use the best sword there is available in the world in history. I'm going to learn how to use the Japanese sword.
Right on.
So I went, and there happened to be a pretty traditional Japanese swordsmanship school in Gainesville, Florida, where I was going to college.
Fantastic. And so,
unbelievably lucky that there was someone.
Yeah. Well, what do they say? When the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Right.
You clearly weren't mature enough before then.
Yeah. I'm not these people who started at like age 4 and kept going. I started about 18 or 19, something like that.
Okay. Now, what can you tell me about when you finally got into an actual classroom setting with sword, and this has been in your mind for such a long time? What was not what you expected about learning sword? What still surprises you about sword that you just did not have any idea that's different from the movies or your fantasies or Dungeons and Dragons? Anything that totally took you by surprise, like, oh, I had no idea this was part of sword culture?
If I had to answer that, I'd probably say the amount of precision that's actually required. You get a lot of people that are doing, the the hack and slash lightsaber techniques, and if you really want to use swords, it has to be an extremely precise thing. I mean, like inches are matterings of life and death. I'm cutting you 1 inch away, and you're not hitting me. So that type of level of precision in your technique.
Okay. So because usually in movies you see swords just clang, clang, smacking into each other, but that actually damages the blade, right? Is that actual sword technique, or is that movie technique when they're just clanging metal together, whack, whack, whack? When you're talking about precision, is it a little more conservative how you handle that blade? I'm just wondering.
We call it arrow flinting when you do that.
Okay.
His was based... Okay, so I've done research on where Errol Flynn's sword style comes from, and it actually comes from a gentleman named Bob Anderson, who was an Olympic fencer. He was the choreographer back then. He did all the way from Errol Flynn all the way through Star Wars and Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean. So he's been around a lot of sword movies.
Yeah, I was wondering. I think I remember that name. That's the same guy. That's incredible. How could that? Wow, that's incredible.
he's got a long pedigree there.
Wow.
He essentially invented movie swordsmanship. But anyway, so he was doing more sport fencing, which is good because it does all that clanging and it's exciting, but and they fight up and down banisters and all that kind of good exciting stuff. But
sure.
Even just kind of messing around, if something lasts more than 3 or 4 moves, someone's dead. So that's that's another aspect I didn't think about until I actually got to play around with it.
That they're really the sword duel or knife duels really are more of a fantasy. Things get finished pretty quickly in real life. That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Which makes the importance of your focus and your technique and your intuition that much more important. And now, has that carried over? Obviously, not obviously, in case someone doesn't know, you eventually fell into Aikido, which, if you've studied some Aikido, is really just empty hand swordsmanship in a way. If that's fair, is that fair to say that?
I think that's 100% correct. It's unarmed weapons work.
Right, which is
disrupt Aikido.
Yeah, which is why it's so easy to criticize. People don't always know what they're looking at, and I suppose, in fairness, some practitioners may overestimate the applications of the empty hand technique if you're not actually using the weapon part of it. But so let's get into that. So, how did when you found Aikido, how did you find that your sword experience helped? Was it you're still in Aikido, so clearly it's been helpful and still making you feel like you're part of that sword culture. So can you speak about the Aikido and how that's fit into your passion?
Oh yeah. So again, my history is this school I studied up in Gainesville. It was called a Bujitsu at the time. A Bujitsu is kind of an overall martial art. It has unarmed, armed, grappling, striking. I think we had staff, sword. It's been a long time since I looked at the curriculum for that one, but it had a bunch of different things all wrapped into one system.
Awesome.
So it was
I would describe it should be, right? That's the way it should be, don't you think? Start some trouble. Don't you think that's the way every martial art should be?
Yeah, why wait until you're a black belt to get
Go
those?
ahead, you can say it.
So
he didn't say it. Okay.
So the Aiki martial arts was always part of what I'd done. If I was describing what I did way back in Gainesville, even though it wasn't called Aikido, I would call it an Aiki martial art. It was still very similar to what the Aikido was. Now, my Aikido is actually kind of a bastardized Aikido in that it's Aikido as taught by Jiu-Jitsu people. So it doesn't have the nice lineage to that, but the way I described it is I never saw anything that we did that nobody else did, and I never saw anything that anyone else did that we didn't do.
Okay.
So there wasn't the lineage, but there was nothing different that I could ever see.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, I mean, I know that Aikido went through some transformation over the years, as many arts do. So when you say that it was taught by Jiu-Jitsu people, does that mean it was an earlier version of the Aikido that was more Atemi heavy and a little more linear, if you like, smaller circle kind of looking, as opposed to the later, more flowing, larger, grander, more demonstrable art? Where did you fall in on that spectrum?
What I mean is, funny you should use the word. I was part of a school that was called Atemi-Ryu Jiu-Jitsu.
Fantastic.
We had a separate belt system, but a separate school, all part of the same overarching system. That was an Aikido system in there as well. So that's what I mean when I say it was taught by Jiu-Jitsu. I think they were, and I'm trying not to badmouth it because I still like the people, but in my opinion, they were trying to make Aikido fit into a Jiu-Jitsu mindset, and it doesn't work for that. That's not what it's designed to do.
Stop right there. So what is the biggest difference between an Aikido mindset and a Jiu-Jitsu mindset, generally speaking, in your mind?
What the end goal is. So in Jiu-Jitsu, at least the way I've always trained it is, I don't know how to say this. The end result is you're going to be a more badass than the other guy. If he throws a punch, you're going to punch him back. You may be blocking it, doing a joint lock, doing all this stuff, but you're going to end up being in a physically superior position. Aikido, if you do the techniques the way that they're designed, your whole job is to stay out of distance. It's hard for someone to punch you if you're 5-10 feet away from them. So that kind of brings up, why does Aikido always get all this crap? Because the techniques don't work. Well, yeah, they don't work if you use them the way they're not intended to work. It's Aikido does a really good job at what it's designed to do. It doesn't work really well at the things it's not designed to do.
Right.
I'm quoting a friend of mine, but he says, you wouldn't blame a boxer because he's, really crappy at double leg takedowns. Right? You wouldn't blame the wrestler because he, can't throw a really good jab. It's just not as what it's designed to do.
And so Aikido is designed to run away. Is that what you're saying?
It's designed to maintain distance and freedom of movement is the best way I've heard it said.
Freedom of movement. Yeah. If I'm running home and I'm safe inside, then I am free to move.
Exactly.
Okay. And even when you do make contact in Aikido, I mean, I studied Aikido for 3 years back in my early days. So also the intention back then, I was explained to me that where jiu-jitsu might have you have a chance to break the wrist, break that wrist. If in Aikido, when you even might feel like you can break the wrist morally, like, oh yeah, this would be deserving of a broken wrist. I'm going to choose not to, though. And hopefully that by preserving your body and treating you with an extra level of respect, that can be reflected back on me, and we can have a mutual coming to peace here, as opposed to me just vanquishing you and dominating you. Is that part of your Aikido tradition as well, or did I hear it all wrong?
Well, no, that's part of what's being said about a lot of Aikido. Is that's the way it's phrased. I like to describe it as it's a physical philosophy. So there is this part of my goal is for me to get away and have freedom of movement. Ideal circumstances mean you're able to do the same thing, and we're able to both go our separate ways, and maybe one of us is mad, but we're both okay. If I have to, do I have the ability to do things that would hurt you and let me get away? Yes, that's like the next step down. So it is part of what I've always been taught is. But again, that's where the training comes in, is most people don't train that aspect. They train, okay, we're going to jump all the way down to you have to hurt someone and cause them pain. Now make that work. As opposed to, no, that's the third step on our tier of choices here.
Right. That's actually why one of the reasons I left Aikido, it wasn't just a technical disappointment. I found that a lot of the people training in Aikido, all the writings and all the philosophy and all the talk in class was all very philosophical and loving, and it was this beautiful spiritual thing. But they're some of the nastiest people I ever met, and bullies and just taking cheap shots, and I didn't see that their practice matched with the philosophy. Whereas when I went to places that actually practiced the more lethal techniques, they're much nicer people. So that's probably worth an exploration some other time. But yeah, but for you, I mean, you seem like a good-natured person and a nice guy. That could be wrong. But do you feel like you have fit into that Aikido philosophy, and that's why you've stayed so long with it, because you actually believe in that and embody it?
Well, I think that's a definitely an attractive part of Aikido. I think that's why a lot of people are attracted to it in the first place. The problem is, like your experience. There's a lot of experience like that where Aikido says, yes, we're the nice, peaceful art, but we're going to treat you to be a badass.
Yeah.
It's like, I do this nice, peaceful art, but I'm going to show you how to break a wrist. It's like, well, then that's not really doing what you're saying you're doing.
Right.
And it's almost magical thinking to say that you can, because, it's the toolbox analogy. If I need a hammer, but all I have is a socket wrench, it's like, yeah, I can make it work, but
right,
it's be great.
Right. Yeah. I the older I've gotten now, where I do feel like I'm a peacemaker at heart, you can't make Aikido really work if you don't have that actual spirit and intention in you. I have found the same thing. Systema talks about that same kind of a thing. For someone like O-Sensei, the founder of Aikido, I believe he probably was a spiritually enlightened guy and very comfortable in his skin, and had a sense of peace and love and unity amongst all creatures. And that was the power in his technique. And that's what gave him the confidence to stand in or enter or connect with someone to make techniques work. But if you're coming in with egotistical issues or aggression issues or hateful attitude, literally those movements don't work for you as well. You can make them work, like you said, like you can force them, but you're always going to be less efficient than someone who's doing it with a pure spirit. That technical skill set goes along with a philosophy. It's very dangerous to pull them apart because they'll never be as efficient separate. Is that fair?
Yeah. One thing to note on O-Sensei is it's not like one day he just woke up and invented Aikido. He studied many different arts. So he already was the badass So he could pull it back and say, no, okay, I can do all of that, but that's not the goal.
Right.
So I think that's where a lot of Aikido schools and a lot of Aikido people get messed up, is that they still think they want to learn how to use Aikido to be the badass.
Yeah.
But they can't, because that's not what it's designed for.
That is such a huge point, my friend. Oh my God. Yeah, because
we're talking about like the guys, or even the guys that are able to test their skills more. BJJ as an example, they don't have to be as bullying, as egotistical about it, because it's kind of available for everyone to see what they know, what they don't know.
Right. Boy, this is a big one. I hope anyone who's listening.
And I'm an Aikido guy saying this, so.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's the same, I think, with Tai Chi. It's the same. There's a big difference between arts that are short-term studies and long-term studies. Aikido is a long-term study. To me, it's like a graduate study. I think Systema is that way. I think Tai Chi is that way. The so-called internal arts. You can't just step in, I don't believe, as a beginner and make any of that stuff work. And when that doesn't work, then you have to regress to some other tactic, even if you stay within that style, and then it's not really the real thing. Whereas if you can, like you said, like with O-Sensei, if you can go through that period of get through your fears and get through your ego and go through the pain and make it work like the old-fashioned way, like just with grunting and hate and anger and but then you get past it, and then you get to this new awakening of like, I don't have to do it that way. That's when all those new arts become available to you. But I think many people, because I certainly met them in Aikido, and I meet them still in other internal arts or soft arts, it's like there's a good heart there. These are nice people who really are attracted to that peace, love, and kindness type of philosophy, but they lack the background to really make those attitudes work in combative situations, and therefore they're vulnerable and their techniques don't work. And these are the people who get criticized because they, I can just stand here and love my attacker. It's like, well, you can't. It is possible, but at your skill level and your emotional maturity of what you've gone through to get to this place, you haven't been there yet. So I do think it's a shortcoming of many internal arts and high-minded arts. I think they're absolutely right, and I think it is the ultimate form of martial art, the personal preservation, the breaking of the spear, as opposed to just spearing everybody. But most people don't do the work long-term to get to that state, and therefore it seems like it doesn't work, and those arts are a waste of time, and you just got to come back to just Krav Maga, man. Just elbow them in the face over and over again. That's all you got to do, because that works for everybody. And it's like, okay, yeah, but there is more. There is another level. Anyway, sorry, I got carried away there.
There's I'm sure I'm going to mangle the quote here, but it's something to the effect of pacifism has to be a choice.
Right.
Oh. Because if it's not a choice, that means you're doing it out of necessity because you have no other option. It has to be, you have the choice between violence and peace, and you are personally choosing peace.
Right. Yeah, you don't get credit if that's just all you can do. You get credit when that's your choice. That's absolutely, I love that. Yep. Thanks for the reminder on that. Which brings me to this idea of being that you are an Aikidoka and you teach Aikido, right? You're a sensei. There must be then a right way to teach it and a wrong way to teach it in your mind. And you're allowed to have your own style of it. So if you have beginners coming in, they don't have a background in Aikido, and you do want to lead them to some type of prowess or skill using the philosophy of love and mutual respect, how do you guide them? What's the right way to bring someone into the Aikido fold?
Slowly. It's I've heard it's Air Force, but the old adage, it's slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So you have to practice this, like you said. It's a long-term thing. I've kind of joked in that there's really only two moves in Aikido. Either you step towards the person at an angle, or you turn in a circle. Everything else is just waving your hands around and flopping.
I like that.
So when I teach Aikido, my goal is to make them see connections. The technique is not the important part. It's how is the movement connecting to something else. There's a reason that when you step in and your arm is up. Well, it's to try and push the other person's balance off. It's not so that you're blocking them per se. It's I'm entering and block and throwing their weight back. There's small things like that. It's the devil's in the details, right? It's it's all these long-term things that are fine motor skills that you have to get past that gross motor skill part of learning it to get to the fine motor skill stuff.
Wow, that's a big one. Yeah, because you always hear people like in the combative arts say, like, look, under stress, it's all gross motor. It's just going to be instinct and reptile brain. But then what's the point of all the training? Right? So you do, over the long term, you enhance your fine motor skill even under pressure, yeah?
So there's Japanese have a couple ideas of Mushin and Zanshin. Mushin is no mind. And there's a couple of different ways I've heard it described in the West. You can talk about like basketball players being in the zone type of thing where just everything just works. I've had a couple instances of that. I'm not going to say like I can turn it off and turn it on. That's kind of the goal of it. But I've had instances in Randori where just everything worked. I did exactly what I wanted to. I actually had one case where we were doing light sparring with Shinai with the bamboo swords. And the guy came up to me afterwards and he goes, "That was awesome." And I had to, the best way I can describe it is it's bad choice of movies, but the Last Samurai, the one with Tom Cruise.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He does this fight in a scene in the streets with got 4 different people.
Right.
And he has to stop and think, okay, crap, what the hell just happened? Mm-hmm. And that's the only way I can describe it. My experience of it is a bunch of stuff happened, and in my head I had to rewind my experience and say, no, what did I just do? But it all worked out exactly the way it was supposed to. That's my one experience with Mushin that was really good.
I think a lot of murderers in prison have claimed that same defense. Like, I don't know. I killed all 4 of them. I don't remember what happened. I swear, Your Honor, it was out of my mind. That could be dangerous, that philosophy. Do you find that, I already know the answer to this, but how many students are willing to take the slow path and the long-term plan to their spiritual enlightenment and skillfulness?
Was it like 1 in every 1,000 students that goes in ends up a black belt, something like that?
Yeah, fair enough. How have your personal frustrations been with students or your patients, or what have you learned about how to keep people, because you know what the end game is. You know the rewards for staying in, but you also know the temptations for people early on to get the heck out. So as a teacher, how do you help people stay in longer so they can make it to more rewards?
So I have one student that this is a student in my day job. He's in one of my classes in high school. And we got talking because he does Wing Chun. And he's a very big fan of Bruce Lee. And he asked me one time, you could tell what he was trying to ask the question and what he wanted the answer to be. But he was asking, like, what do you think Bruce Lee would be like if he was alive now? And my answer was, I think he would have learned to be soft. Mm. And that was not what he wanted to learn here.
He wanted you to say that he would be the UFC heavyweight champion.
Right. Something else. Oh, think how much farther, martial arts would be if he was still alive. It's like, yeah, but he's got to learn to have old chi as well as young chi. I hate the word chi, but it fits the subject here. So
you would say ki, right? So you hate the Chinese term.
So yeah, I think maybe it's how much do I not want to be a badass anymore? How much am I willing to just do what I need to do? How much do I not want to physically dominate another person versus just do what I need to do? Mm.
That's a separate goal, right? The young man might want to humiliate the other person, and the old guy just wants to go home. I just don't want any trouble.
Yeah, it's Rory Miller has a couple of books on this. Meditations on Violence is, I think his first one he wrote on it. But he talks about asocial and social violence. Mm. And most of the young kids stuff is social violence. It's, I'm not trying to do anything but socially show everybody that I'm bigger and badder than you are. Mm-hmm. You can usually tell because they look at you and they square up, they do the monkey dance, and then usually what you see an over-the-shoulder look and then a big roundhouse. That over-the-shoulder look is to make sure there's witnesses who can see how badass they are.
I got to reread that interpretation of the look. Okay, yeah, that's good.
I think as you get older, I care less and less about my social standing as far as that goes. I don't know if that's our animalistic self still in there or it's just human nature, however you want to say it. But I think as you get older, you just stop caring about the social dominance, or at least the physical social dominance. Maybe we find other ways to be dominant.
Exactly. Yeah, that's where big gold watches come in.
Right.
Yeah, you got me thinking now. You look when you're a young man, you look over your shoulder to make sure everybody's watching. When you're an old man, you look over your shoulder to make sure nobody's watching.
Right. Exactly. There you go. That's your definition of how you know you're an adult.
Exactly. Yeah, I know about court proceedings. I don't want anyone witnessing this. You've mentioned that high school teaching. What is the crossover for you? I mean, do you have a club at the high school for teaching martial arts, or do they know that you're a badass? Do you wear your black belt into the classroom? What do you do? The sword
on my head, Daniel LaRue style. No. I do have a club. There's about 4 or 5 people in it right now. It's the first year I'm trying it at the school.
It's taking you this long to set that up, huh?
Yeah, it's more of about insurance purposes than anything else.
Because you're going to break some wrists.
Yeah, I know. It's a possibility. I've only ever seen 2 bad injuries in an Aikido dojo. Like, oh crap, we got to take someone to the hospital type of injuries, more than just, like I stubbed a toe. So, there is that insurance, that liability aspect of it. And I'm always nervous about that.
Sure.
Ironically, this is a fun story. I started teaching high school before I started teaching martial arts. So I was literally just kind of thrown in to teaching high school.
Okay.
I was substituting one day, and the guy had quit. So they're like, "Hey, you can teach biology, right?" And my answer was, "Yes, I can." So for me, and it took me years to realize, it's not the material that's important in teaching. It's the method of teaching. That's the important part. So for me, once I started teaching martial arts, I actually got a book on how to teach martial arts. It was blending teaching philosophy with how to teach martial arts. And that's where I learned actually most of my teaching stuff that I went back and used in the high school.
Very cool. Are there any tips that you can share for teachers out there? 1 or 2 things that have really changed you, or you have found over the years to be really effective in keeping someone's attention or enthusiasm going?
Well, and in short term, in like demonstrating techniques, one thing I found is, they talk about, so teaching theology is, there's audio learners, visual learners, and kinetic learners, right? Well, that's all BS. Everyone learns all 3, but they found out the way people will learn best is when you blend all 3 of them. So what a good thing to do is, as you're teaching, as you're the guy up in front demonstrating in a technique, is to include all 3. Make references. Look at what I'm doing here. Show them how you're moving. Make sounds as you're doing it. Include all 3 aspects of you're doing that as you're teaching, and it tends to make the process go easier. And honestly, martial arts has a lot of weird advanced concepts that you don't learn anywhere else in the world.
True.
So it's all new to everyone.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I always liked also that there's a demonstration, I think, of Horian Gracie showing how to teach, and just literally just taking people by the hand. And like, that's the kinesthetic part of it. Like, we're here, I'm going to tell you how to do this. I'm going to show you how to do it, and I'm going to help you do it. I'm going to put my body into your body here and help you do this. So in martial arts, it allows you to do that. Biology, you probably can't get away with going around saying, "Here, let me show you this as what do you call it?" I don't have any biological terms. Oh crap.
Well, we do stuff like that with like dissecting the frog. That's the kinesthetic on their part. They have to pull apart the frog. They have to look at the ab muscles. They have to be able to figure out what they are.
And that's what they remember, right? Because they did it. Yeah. Do you still do that? I haven't been in school in a long time. Do they still dissect frogs? Is that part of the thing?
It's never a part of a curriculum that I shouldn't say, in about 10 years, it's never been part of a curriculum. However, I do it every single year because, come on, it's dissecting a frog. That's the highlight of every biology class.
Wow. Well, I was wondering, with animal rights groups, or if cultures have changed, if they still look down on that now. I wasn't sure. But so you include it, whether the curriculum, you go out of your way to dissect a frog. I'm going to make a note of that. Uh-oh.
Between that
stabbing
and
slashing, and he loves cutting up frogs. Okay. Nothing wrong here, officer. There's nothing to see here.
I joke about this, but you have to be kind of a little bit S&M to do martial arts in the first place, because you got to enjoy inflicting or the idea of inflicting pain, and you kind of got to like pain yourself, because it's like, ow, that hurt. Okay, do it again.
No comment. Do you believe that being that you're right there with all these young minds being shaped, I got into martial arts during that teen period. Do you feel if you could wave a magic wand and make martial arts part of every school curriculum, at what age would you institute it? First, would you do that? Would you make martial arts training of some kind part of everyone's schooling? And if so, at what age would you make sure it was part of the curriculum?
No.
No, you wouldn't. Oh, okay.
No, I wouldn't.
Really? Okay.
And I think so. I teach subjects that I think are, for the most part, useless once you get to be an adult. I teach chemistry, for example, this year. And honestly, chemistry is pretty useless the way we teach it. We teach it as a mental exercise. We don't teach it as it's all stuff you can't see. It's all very ephemeral. You're talking about atoms and molecules. Well, nobody sees atoms and molecules. Now, if I taught it purely as, reactions and stuff like that, like practical chemistry, that could be a useful part. So I'm of a very strong philosophy that a lot of schooling should only be what you want it to be. You have to pick something, and I think martial arts, because if you looked at it, if I was a teacher if I was graded as a martial arts teacher as I am as a teacher, I would be fired because of all the students I have that have failed and quit and left high school or left martial arts school. So it has to be something that drives them. Otherwise, it's little 8-year-old Johnny being forced to go to Taekwondo and he doesn't want to, and that's never going to work for anybody.
So let kids do whatever they want. Give them matches. Give them chocolate.
Let them learn whatever they want. There's a difference.
I want to learn how to use matches. I want to learn how to eat chocolate. I want to learn. Okay, well, I could probably pick that one apart a little bit. But overall then, okay, so no, you don't want to make it universal martial arts for kids.
No.
So what age do you think is the best to start learning martial arts?
So it depends on what you mean by martial arts. Like, for example, I'm going to pick on Taekwondo because that's an easy one to pick on, I think.
Wow, an Aikido guy picking on another martial art. Everyone, hang on, come here, watch this. Go for it.
If you compare it to Taekwondo to, like you were talking about, Aikido, where it's a lot of fine motor movements, I think arts that have gross motor movements, you can start earlier. I think something like Aikido, honestly, 12 or 13 is the earliest they would start to be able to get the idea of what it's supposed to be. I think you can make it to where it's a younger art, made for younger people. But it wouldn't be Aikido. It would be something else. It would be, I don't know, pre-Aikido or something like that.
Aikido.
There you go.
Use that.
I think that one somewhere, but yeah.
Okay. An educator whose life was changed by martial arts, who doesn't want to include martial arts in other people's education just because it's mandatory. That's your main issue. If you don't,
it's mandatory.
You don't want the kids to have to learn something. I'm just trying to get my head around that because I fully expected you to want to put that in the school system. So I'm trying to really consider your point of view and how wrong you are. I'm trying to figure out how to accept that.
I'll put it this way. Again, I don't know last time you've ever been in high school, but go to a high school gym class. At least 2/3, if not 5/6 of the people are sitting on the sideline using their phone. They don't want to be out there playing the basketball or whatever sport they happen to be playing at that moment. And I don't want that to be martial arts. I don't want that to be their impression of it. If there is a point later in their life that they say, you know what, I've always did want to learn how to do that, I don't want them to have that bad taste in their mouth or their brain.
So you think they take basketball or dodgeball personally? They're not just upset with the school system. You think they're going to harbor? They made me play basketball, so therefore I hate basketball now for the rest of my life. I hate chemistry. I hate biology. I hate everything they made. This is a really strange. Okay, I'm really surprised by this. It seems like kids are. I work with kids for a living, so I also see kids not high school level. I'm before kids, high school, generally. And if you don't tell children how to behave and what's important, that's when I think when you run into trouble. So that my thinking is that I think by the time you're in teenagers, you already have personalities and attitudes. So it's probably a much tougher thing to do. That's where the military comes in. We have to break them down to rebuild them, because whatever you've been brought in could be have abuse in the background, or low self-esteem, or ego out of control, or all kinds of stuff. But when you're dealing with smaller kids, younger kids, you have the ability to still kind of help them shape into a person. You don't have to break them down. You just build them up. So in that respect, what's that?
I think it has to do with internal versus external motivations too.
Well, yes. I mean, even most adults, I mean, they have belt systems that didn't start with little kids in America. I hate when people always say, oh, America, I got to have a belt and blah, blah, blah. Well, we didn't start that, and those weren't little kids who were getting belts over there first. So whatever, but I think that's a human nature thing, right? Is Aikido popular in Japan? Do we know?
Ironically, I think it's bigger in the U.S. I mean, granted, we have a bigger population, but I think if you look at like the world of martial arts, I think the U.S. is the king.
Yeah. Because
we have so much mixing, we have so much available. I doubt if there would be anywhere in China if I wanted to go find Penjak Silat or Eskrima, but I can do that here. And there's probably one within 50 miles of my house. Depending where you are. If you're in LA, I'm sure there's, one within 5 miles of your house.
Yeah, we'll see what happens after the pandemic stuff here. But yeah, per capita, there are a lot of martial arts schools out here, and it's just like the food scene. There's just something of everything you can get into if you're no excuse not to go study something. Now, the other big topic that I wanted to make sure we touched on today was the fact that you are this very prolific podcast. You have over 100 and something episodes now, right?
Yeah, I think I put out one yesterday. It was 110 or 111.
Wow. Congratulations. Yeah. And that means you've talked to a lot of different martial artists, and you've had some bigger names coming through as well. Is there anything you have taken away from virtually meeting so many different martial artists, their stories or their attitudes, or any common denominators, or any kind of insights you've gained from interviewing? It's been worth it, I presume, to have met all these people one way or the other.
Yeah, I've said on my podcast, half the reason I do this is because it gives me a legitimate reason to kind of online stalk them. It gives me a reason to have conversations with all the authors of the books that I read. I guess in the old days I could have done snail mail, but this is an opportunity for me to say, well, no, I really want to talk to him and say, what did he mean by this? So it's a way for me to actually have conversations with the books I have, so to speak.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful.
If you had to ask my insight in it, I've broadened my idea of what martial arts is and what it's for. Mm-hmm. I've talked to just about, I don't know, as far as I can tell, every single martial art I can find. There's I don't even know how to pronounce it, but it's the one style from India that I haven't talked to anybody from, the Kali Parayat, something like that.
I've seen it written down. I can't say it, and I'm not going to.
No offense. That's not my area of study. So,
right.
I've talked to pretty much every other regional area in the world.
Amazing.
And it's broadened my idea of what it is, and it's like we talked about at the beginning, the cultural component of it. Mm-hmm. Some of it's technological. What did they have at the time? Some of it's, environmental. Why does Silat step the way they do? Well, it's because they were walking around on muddy mountains. They weren't, playing in rice fields, so to speak. Mm. So you get a lot of it explains a lot of the reasoning behind it. I went to a really interesting thing. If I'll plug them for a minute. It's called Combat Con. Mm. It's in Vegas every year. It's mainly HEMA, historical European martial arts. And I was talking to a guy about medieval dagger fighting. And he was talking about how it's like, well, someone came up to him and says, well, you can do it a lot quicker and a lot better this way. It's like, yeah, but historically they did it this way because they had on these big, thick doublets that were made out of really sweaty wool, and you had to push hard to get through them. It wasn't a slicing art because that wouldn't have done anything to him. Mm. Think if you're up in Wisconsin fighting somebody in a snowmobile suit,
Right. Oh, don't bring me back to those memories. Ay.
Do you have the moon boots too?
I'm wearing them right now. It is. I hope that people listening do. You've given me another appreciation to look into the research for where does your art come from, and look at some of those whys. Why are there big movements or small movements? Why are some styles have deeper stances or higher stances? Which knuckles you use? There's every single piece of what you're doing. There's some reason for it. I'm a big believer in that martial arts has always been a practical endeavor. People say, "Oh, that's a fancy move," and especially like with Salat or Kung Fu, it's easy. Oh, those are just fancy stuff, fancy. But like, no one in the history of the battle would ever create something just to be fancy or just to look cool. If you want to attract students to your school, maybe. You want to win at a tournament, maybe. But those are kind of more modern things. If there's something that was going on 200, 300 years ago, there's a reason why there was a red ribbon on the end of that spear. There's a reason, and it's so easy for people just to criticize and say, that's stupid, or that's just fancy, that's just showbiz. It's like, no. The reward for the research is then you have a greater understanding of the technique, and then you can hopefully use that technology to your advantage, right? So thank you for reminding me to stay on that research path. It's not always just like, who cares what they used to do? I'm here and now, and all that matters is modernizing and creating my own hybrid. It was like, well, hang on, because there are people who lived before you and they figured out a lot of these problems, and don't reinvent the wheel all the time. Look to the past for some kind of learning. Yeah. So you're all over that.
Don't be afraid to call BS on your art either. There's a lot of mythology that if you stop and think about it, it doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. It's good for the storytelling aspect of it, but it really doesn't make any sense.
Sure.
There are no, people aren't watching frogs fighting fish to figure out the new secret kung fu type.
Hey, you stay in your art. You criticize your own art. You stay out of kung fu. I'll take care of all the BS monitoring over here, okay? Look at this guy making fun of my frog fish studies. I got 3 buckets full of fish and frogs right here, my friend. You go dissect your frogs. I'm dealing with living frogs, not these dead ones you play with.
Like with koi style kung fu.
The koi style, yes. We sit and we eat. It's my favorite. Give me some pie, some of them fish flakes. Let me ask you, you're going to continue the show, I presume. I'd like to ask you about your goals for the show, your goals for your personal training, your goals for, you mentioned maybe starting a school. Let's take those in order there. What's the goal for your podcast at this point? Have you been on video much? I'm trying to use all my podcasting now on video. Hopefully this recording will come out. Just to reach more people. Do you have any goals to expand your brand, so to speak? And how far do you want to go with this show?
Yeah, it's funny for someone that owns a podcast. I'm an extreme introvert. I really don't like being out in front of people.
It's very hard to find stuff on you, my friend. Yeah, usually I do some research before the show, get some pictures together, get some facts, there's so little on you. It's almost like you don't exist, which is bizarre because you've been doing that show for years, over 100 episodes. Even when I just put in your name, which is an oddly spelled name, still it doesn't come up number 1 in Google. I'm like, where is this guy? He's like purposely hiding. It's very strange. So that's on purpose, though.
It like that, yeah. Yeah, video is not something I'm interested in. I understand why, I really do, but it's just not something I'm interested in.
Okay, well, I appreciate you showing your mug here today. Now we know what you look like, so that's good. Yeah. So your goal for the show is just to continue the way you've been doing it, just keep going?
Yeah, my show tends to have, if you haven't figured out, a real academic bent to it. Mm-hmm. I like to get into, I figure there's no reason to do a podcast on, how did I do Aikido over voice? So do it on all the parts that you can talk about, the history, the philosophy, the different martial arts. I'm still doing essentially what I've been doing for 20-something years now, but I really appreciate all the other stuff. I can at least have an idea in my head and recognize, that's Bagua, that's, Xingyi. So I can at least appreciate what they are and recognize them. Even if I don't do them myself, even if I'm not capable of doing it, I can at least recognize what it is and the theory behind what they're doing. Mm-hmm. So again, no offense, but the podcast is for me.
Yeah, of course. No offense to you. This podcast is for me. I understand. We're selfish. I get it. So what did we say? Goals for your show and goals for your personal training. So what's your goal? What are you working on? Where are you headed?
So way back in Gainesville, I went to, so that must have been somewhere before 2000. So somewhere in that range, 99, 2000, something like that. I went to the Atlanta Blade Show because Gainesville is about 6 hours, 4 hours away from Atlanta, something like that. About 6 hours.
Did you say Blade Show?
Yes, it was a knife and sword show.
So a combat con, then to the Blade Show. No wonder you're keeping a low profile. The FBI, you're number one on that list at this point. Holy smokes. Okay, the Blade Show. Take me to the Blade Show, sir.
So again, this is 20-something years ago now. There was a Tameshigiri demonstration, mat cutting, done by a gentleman named James Williams, who at the time he has a company called Bugay. So I started ordering from them. It's a sword and samurai, I guess is the best way to say it, a samurai and samurai sword catalog, really, really high quality items. So expensive that I only was ever able to buy a few things from him ever, but really, really good. So it's just someone I've always had in the back of my mind. I've watched videos on him. I've seen things with him online. And after living in Nashville for about 2 years, it turns out he's got a school here.
Wow.
So and it was ironic because the way I figured it out is I went in, I think it was 2017. I went to the Blade Show again because from where I live in Nashville, it's about a 4-hour drive to Atlanta. So I met up with a friend of mine coming from Florida, and we met there. And, of course, I went to James Williams' Tameshigiri cutting demonstration again. And, he's talking about it. And I talked to one of the guys. And I said, he goes, well, if you're ever in Pennsylvania, here, take my card. And then about a week later, I'm up in Wisconsin visiting family up there. And I look on Facebook, and it says, hey, James Williams is in Nashville doing a demonstration. I'm like, oh, crap, the one time I'm out of school. And wait a minute, no, he's got a school there. Ah, crap.
Wow.
So this guy that I've known about for 20-something years, I'm finally able to study in his system.
Wow. What a beautiful full circle on that. Oh, that's wonderful. When is that actually going to happen? When this quarantine's over? When are you going to jump out and sign up?
Well, I've been doing it now for 2 or 3 years now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry.
And then, in fact, actually later tonight we're gonna try a Zoom class to see how that works.
Fantastic. That's my preferred method of practicing sword dueling is through the video camera. Yes.
I got you. No, I didn't. Yes, you did.
I think if you presented that to your school board, they'd be much happier with your Aikido class if we just did it on Zoom. No liability issue here. That's fine.
There you go.
So that was the goal for your show, the goal for your training. And then you talked about it. Maybe at one point you were thinking about opening up your own school. Is that still on your mind, or are you going to wait for your pension? Or what's your plan?
Well, I feel qualified to teach Aikido, but since I'm doing this new, it's an Aiki system, but it's not Aikido, so I don't feel qualified enough to teach that. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, if I was going to do it, I don't think I would teach Aikido and then do something else. I would kind of seem dishonest if I had students.
Did you just say, I want to make sure I heard that right.
Sure, go ahead.
You have a knowledge base that potentially could change someone's life, and you don't feel you should share any of that until you personally go scratch this itch over here, because somehow that's dishonest to your students. Did I hear that right?
Well, the dishonesty part would make it seem like it's like, I'm teaching you this, but on the side, I'm going and learning the good stuff over here. That would be the dishonest part to me.
But I think you're being unfair. I don't think to yourself,
Sure.
And to the world, because personally, I'm a big believer in martial arts and nice people sharing good information with other nice people. You're a good guy. You've got years of experience. You can help a lot of people on the way. How dare you, sir, not teach more often, or to think that just because you're still learning something else. I'm involved. I see different teachers all the time, but I still teach any chance I get. You teach what you know, and presumably it's not either. It's not one or the other, like, oh, you have to pick. If I'm not doing Aikido, then that means I don't like Aikido. No, everything you do enhances what you're doing, right? So you're studying something to take yourself. It's a graduate study to only make your Aikido knowledge deeper and stronger, so that when you come back to your students and say, look, here's day one Aikido. Personally, I'm learning from this other teacher, and I'm still interested in this other stuff. And all of that you're going to benefit from, because I'm not just an Aikido teacher. I'm an Aikido teacher with these other pieces of information coming in. So how do you not see that that's a benefit to your students and not somehow a dishonest offering? I don't get it. What are you talking about? No. Rejected. Next case.
That one's gone. It's different in martial arts when you have different systems that are that close. It'd be like saying, again, Taekwondo, because I think that's an easy one that most people would recognize. It'd be like saying, I have my black belt in, well, it's not WTF anymore, but whatever the WTF Taekwondo is, but then I'm secretly learning the ITW style over here. It's like, well, yeah, that doesn't seem
Well, the key word there was secretly. Why would you? It wouldn't have to be secret. You just tell your students, yeah, I study with this guy and I study with that guy. And here's something that works and you can practice. And this is where you should start. And someday I'll tell you what I'm into. But right now, I mean, as a teacher, you have to have a head start over your students, right? Reconsider this.
There's stories about Bruce Lee where, he'd go and set up a school and say, okay, here's the curriculum. And then the instructor would get a call literally in the middle of class and goes, okay, you remember how we're doing that punch? Yeah, we're changing that now. So I guess it's kind of similar to that, but
there you just, again, like you said with Bruce Lee, he was a young guy. He died young. He never got to be old. So he's an excited guy. He's kind of like running around just, I like this, chasing some shiny toys. Oh, here's my new experiments. And he's sharing stuff as it happens, but he never had the benefit of like an extra 10 years, 20 years to go, what really panned out over time in the long term. He's a short-term guy. So he doesn't have that. He got cheated out of that perspective, right? So, but you're still alive. You've outlived your St. Bruce. So, therefore, if you're training as hard and you have the passion for it, then, I mean, gosh, I just wish I can't have nice people with good hearts and skill sets sitting idly thinking they're not ready enough or there's any kind of issue keeping you from changing people's lives. So please reconsider.
I think some of it is, if you ever ask any artist that said, when is the painting done? And they'll say, it's never done.
Right.
It's kind of maybe part of that too is, when do you know enough to teach? Well, you never do.
Right.
You just haven't done enough to say, I know it all. I can teach this now.
Right. No, it does. Yeah, that's one of my favorite quotes. Art is never finished. It's merely abandoned.
Right.
But in this case, again, that's the two teacher types. I have a podcast about that. The authoritarian who thinks, no, I know it all. It's been done. I'm not learning anymore. This is it. Follow me. I've already figured it all out. That's one model. Or the student model of teacher, the approachable teacher. He's like, I'm still learning this. I'm still experimenting. I'm still trying stuff. But this part that I'm showing you right now, I've been doing that part for 20, 30 years. This part, that's where you should start because I've been there. This other stuff that I've been doing for 5 years, that's me. That's something I'm experimenting with. If it pans out, I'll let you know. But you're way behind me right now. So you got some catching up to do. So, we'll talk. There are levels to this. And I think your students only respect you more when they see that you're still learning, you're still making mistakes, you're still excited about the whole process. How can that not stick to them too? Like, yeah, I'm excited to keep learning. I'm excited to make mistakes. You're the role model for that, right? So, or not.
So maybe after the quarantine, there'll be a lot of niches open for new martial arts teachers.
Absolutely. Well, there will be if you create one. Go do it. Don't wait. No one's going to knock on your door. Can you show us Aikido? No. Don't wait for that. Put it in people's faces. Get that high school program up. You already got it going. Double it. No, I'm giving you a hard time just because, we both love martial arts. And life is short, as we know more now than ever. So if you got something to share, just like through your podcast, that's one way to do it. I'm just giving you a little hard time about sharing it in other ways. Because like you said, martial arts is the touching part of it too, the kinesthetic part. You want to say it, show it, and feel it. I want you to feel this from me. It's like the best gift a teacher can give, don't you think?
I don't disagree.
Great. Then I will look forward to seeing your flyer. I'm going to get you on Instagram right away. Let's see this flyer up and be ready to roll when the quarantine's over, okay? But you've been very generous with your time here. We just hit the hour mark. So is there any parting word of wisdom or anything you didn't get to cover today? I apologize if I took too much of your time. You got me excited about a couple of topics. Any words of wisdom for the martial arts and happy life people out there?
There's one thing I keep saying is, and it kind of has to do with a lot of what we've kind of talked about today, is make martial arts an active part of your life. Don't make it a passive thing. Don't be the guy that's, well, after Tuesday's martial arts class is done, I don't think about it until Thursday's martial arts class. Make it an active part of it. Think about it on your off time. Think about, like you said, why does it have that little red sash on the end of the sword? Well, there's got to be a reason, and somebody else must know that. Let me go look that up. Don't just passively sit by and wait for knowledge to come to you. Go out and seek it out yourself.
Amen, brother. I love that. Thank you so much. Again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your good spirit. We've run into each other. Hopefully we'll run into each other more often. I apologize again for spending so much time not making good on my promise, but I'm so glad we did, and I look forward to the next chance to do this.
Anytime, brother.
All right. Thank you so much. See, I told you. Sensei Wilson has a lot of good insights about martial arts training. But don't stop here. Go check out his podcast, Martial Thoughts. I think you're going to find loads more of good information over there. Until next time, smiles up, my friend. Let that smile be your shield and your sword. Keep fighting for a happy life.